Right on Writers. This is Adrian Santiago, your host here on the Books by Adrian author platform. Welcome, welcome, welcome. If this is your first time with us, you're joining at kind of a weird time because this is the end of this show. This is the series finale of this show. And we'll get more into that after the opening here. But I just wanted to say hello and welcome. Thank you for being here today. I already see people coming into the chat, so welcome very much. If it is your first time here, don't worry. Just because this is the last episode of this show doesn't mean there's not more coming. There is a lot more coming. So go ahead and subscribe to the channel. You know how to do that. It's a thing. I am a sci-fi fantasy author. I have written this novel, Mythic, Shadow of the Spark. Mythic is a sci-fi fantasy series. Shadow of the Spark is a crime thriller in that series. It opens up the world to you. And you are more than welcome to join my newsletter where you will get a free short story, which is the prologue, The Death and Rebirth of Bella Erdman. If you like this short story, this novel is for you. Jump on that. The ebook these days is only $2.99. And of course, signed copies of the paperback are also available through my very website. So go ahead and check that out. Booksbyadrian.com. That is Mythic, Shadow of the Spark, a crime thriller in a sci-fi fantasy world. Today's guest on the series finale of The Writer's Den is Doc Honor. I shared a table with this gentleman a few months back in January at a book festival, and I knew right away I had to have him on the show. It is only fitting that he is the last. I'm so excited. Let's get into it. This is The Writer's Den. All right. Let's go ahead and bring out the man, the myth, the legend, the author of Boom, Not Like Us, the great and honorable Doc Honor. Doc, hello and welcome to the Writer's Den. How are you today, sir?
I am fantastic. I am honored to be here, as it were. Glad to be your finale on your show too.
I am honored to have you, Doc Honor. It is only appropriate that you be the one. I'm very happy that it's you. This is going to be a really great time. Let's get the music going in the background here. All right, Doc, I'm going to kick things off for you here with an easy one. Where are you from? When did you start writing, and why?
Where am I from? This is a question I get all the time, and I have no answer. I was born on Guam, and I've lived 34 different places in my life. So I don't have a where you are from. I am from wherever I am at the moment. Right now, I'm living in Central Florida. What's that?
I said, it sounds like you're from Guam.
No, not really. I mean, I lived there for 6 weeks as an infant.
Wow. So, yeah, from the beginning, moving around. Wow.
Yeah, that's right. That's because my father was in the Navy, and I was a Navy pilot. And so when you're in the military, you move a lot.
Indeed, you do. All right. When did you start writing, and why?
I actually thought I first ran across science fiction when I was about 11 years old. I can remember sitting in the library at a naval air station in Florida here and discovering science fiction. And I would sit for hours in the stacks, pulling the books off the stacks and reading them. And absolutely loved it. And I always thought, even from that day, that I could probably tell a pretty good yarn. And then I went off and had a career. No, actually, I had 3 other careers along the way before I actually started writing. I had it in the back of my mind all along. And it was about 9 years ago that I really started writing seriously and actually writing stories in science fiction. And why? Because I just love the genre. I love the idea of taking problems that exist in our world today and putting them in some future world so that I can examine things about the problem that you can't do today. And so that's what I really love about it. And that's what I've done.
That's fantastic. That's a great answer. So, according to your bio on your website, the golden age of sci-fi is these four authors here. Why is that? Why are they the golden age of sci-fi?
I don't know. They're just called that by a lot of people, but it was, science fiction, of course, started with Mary Shelley and Frankenstein, and that was 200 years ago. 200? 100 years ago.
Is
100 years
Frankenstein
ago.
really that old?
Frankenstein, early 1800s.
Wow.
I guess that's 200 years ago, yeah. And then H.G. Wells and Jules Verne in the late 1800s, and it was kind of something that was off to one side and wasn't really acknowledged until the pulp fiction of the 30s and 40s. And it was
Wow.
in the pulp fiction of the 30s and 40s that science fiction really came into its own. And it acquired a cachet that almost became respectable by the 1960s.
1818, by the way, is the answer. January 1st, 1818 is when
Here we go.
Frankenstein was published. Wow.
Over 200 years ago. Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's wild. That's
It is.
wild. You can walk into a bookstore today and pick up a copy of that book.
That's endurance, isn't it? I'd love my books to still be alive 200 years from now.
Yeah, man.
That's pretty amazing.
That's incredible.
So
All right.
Heinlein and Asimov and Pohl and Bradbury and lots of other authors of that era were the people I grew up with. I remember I subscribed to Analog Magazine in the latter days of John W. Campbell Jr., who was the editor who fostered the careers of all of those four. And I remember reading the first Dragon Riders of Pern story, which was serialized in Analog Magazine in the late 1960s. And I was blown away by this creative mind that had a world of dragons that had a mind meld with their riders, and it was really less of Pern, that little girl who grew up cowering in a small shed that held this small dragon that was a watchware that watched over the place. Pretty creative stuff, and it was that creativity that really called to me, because I love coming up with new ideas.
That's beautiful, man. Well, that being the case, then how does being a Navy pilot during the Cold War factor into your writing?
Well, I talk about it, the fact that writing is my fourth career. I was a Navy pilot. I went to the Naval Academy, and I did land on an aircraft carrier, one flight in order to qualify for my Navy wings. It was the best carnival ride I've ever been on in my life. I can tell a long story about that one flight and all the fun I had on that one flight. However, I did not do carrier aviation after that. I went to fly multi-engine airplanes, and this is kind of a scary thought. In that time frame, I was flying a big airplane, a big 4-engine airplane, over the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, monitoring the Soviet submarines that had missiles aimed at our cities.
Wow.
Yeah, and thankfully we never had to do anything about it other than monitor them and watch over them.
That's heavy.
We used to have conversations in the cockpit of what would we do if we saw a missile coming out of the water right now.
Yeah. What would you do?
What would we do? Well, to be honest, during that time frame, we never flew with a weapon on board. Because
So you couldn't shoot it down if you wanted to.
not unless the Cold War had gotten hot enough that they raised the DEFCON levels, then we would have had weapons on board, but we were never at higher levels, and so we never actually had a weapon on board.
Interesting.
So how does that inform my writing? My writing has political components to it, and those political components come out of the life that I've seen of countries at odds with each other, as we have today with the attacks that are happening just in the last 2 days between Iran and Israel. We have ideologies where people fight against each other, and that's part of what I illuminate in my writing. So yeah, it factors. My military background does play in my writing. My engineering background plays in my writing. That was my second career as a systems engineer, building large complex systems for the military and other people.
As you can see by my screen, that was my very next question. Tell me about your time on engineering teams to build intelligence systems that could prevent war.
I loved that concept. I really did. When I
Prevent in
got
all
out,
caps.
I did not stay in the Navy for a long career, and when I got out of the Navy, I used my engineering background to get several jobs as a large systems engineer, leading teams of engineers to build complex systems. And for many years, the systems I built were intelligence systems. They listened in on the enemy communications to determine what the enemy was going to do. And if you knew what the enemy was going to do, you could use that information in diplomacy to prevent war. And there was one point at which I interviewed with a company that actually built missiles. And they offered me a job because of my experience. And I thought about it and I said, do I really want to build things that blow people up?
Yeah, is that the contribution you want to make?
Right. And the answer to me was no. And so I turned down that job offer and I stayed in the Intel world. And
living up to your last name, sir.
Well, it's a form of honor, yes.
Yeah,
I guess.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. That's exactly the kind of a situation that a hero in a novel or a movie would be put in. Here's this incredible opportunity to make good money, having this, high paying position, and you doing the moral decision rather than the greedy one. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot to that.
Exactly.
There's a lot to that. There's a lot to that.
And isn't that important in life to do?
Yeah.
When we start making the selfish decisions, we gradually take ourselves lower and lower and lower.
Mm-hmm.
And when we do the right decisions, the moral decisions, we take ourselves higher and higher and higher. I like being higher.
Agreed. Words to live by, my friend. You've lived in a lot of places. You've moved around a lot. You've traveled a lot. Of all 50 states, which I believe you have been to all 50 states, which is your favorite one to write in?
Florida. That's where I am.
A shocking answer.
Right.
I gotta say.
I have not only been in all 50 states, I've also managed to touch down and been in 33 different countries around the world. I've seen how people live in a lot of different situations, and no country has yet attracted me away from the United States. I think we have a great system and a great country. The one that came closest was Australia. It was really good down there, but it was just too far away from my kids and grandkids, so no, didn't go there. Of the 50 states, every place I go, I see magnificent things. I'm a man of faith, and I see God's hand in everything, everywhere I've been. Even the things that are built by people, I see God's hand behind it. And so I recognize the beauty everywhere I go. And right now I'm sitting in the lanai of my house, and my house backs up onto a golf course. And I'm looking out across all of this land that I don't have to maintain, I don't have to own. And yet it's beautiful green, grassy sward with way over there on the other side, there's a tee box and there's a couple of people teeing off. And I love seeing things like this. So I sit here and write.
That's beautiful, man.
And when the ideas don't flow very well, I stop and I look out on that world out there with palm trees and magnolias and huge, huge live oak trees. And it re-inspires me again.
That's beautiful, man. My family, just to digress for a second, my family, our housing situation has always been in flux, has always been a something that needs fixing. Everywhere we end up, there's just so much where we're like, this doesn't work for us, and we have a place lined up that we're moving into in August. We've already paid first month in deposit. We're all set. Everything is ready. We're in no rush to get out of this place and find another one. We have time to save up some money. It's the first time that we're transitioning in a really comfortable way instead of freaking out through the whole process. and we're moving to a place that's big enough for the entire family. It's a nice townhouse. There's 3 bedrooms for the kids, and there's a huge living room and a dining room. We're gonna be able to have people over. We've never been able to do that before. It has a backyard. It's got a front, like porch area for my parents who are, we're Puerto Rican, and inevitably they'll be sitting out on the porch gossiping about the neighbors. And like I'm so excited because the back porch has this great bench that I can sit on and write and look out at the scenery that just not quite as beautiful as what you're describing, but still some scenery back there. And it's going to be a wonderful blessing. And I'm really excited about that. So you just made me appreciate it all the more by.
Oh, great. I'm
by
glad
sharing.
to hear that. I'm glad to hear that.
Now,
and, I've got a few more years on than you do, and I remember those times of stepping up little bit by little bit, and getting a little nicer house and a little nicer view, and I love it.
Yeah, it's nice. It's nice, especially a nice cup of coffee back there in the morning, doing a little writing. That's good stuff. That's good stuff. Now, you mentioned that you don't want to live anywhere else. You're happy with America, but before knowing that, I was going to ask, of the 34 countries, which is nothing to sneeze at, 34 countries that you have visited throughout your lifetime, which would you live in? If you had to, like, let's say you had to leave the United States, what would you go to? What's the next best thing? You mentioned
Next best. I mentioned it a bit ago, was Australia. I did my doctorate work in Australia.
The giant spiders didn't deter you?
No, the giant spiders didn't bother me. Snakes. We've got snakes here in Florida too, and we have, all 4 of the poisonous snakes that live in the United States live in Florida, except for there's a 5th one, but it's been imported. Well, they've got those in Australia too, and but what really attracted me to Australia was the laid-back attitude. It reminds me of what the United States used to be, about people just easygoing with each other, and live at a little slower pace than we do here in the U.S. And yet they still speak English, which I understand well. So, and I can say things like "good eye, mate." And
good eye, mate. Yeah, that's not a knife.
Right.
This is a knife.
No, this is a knife. Yes.
Knife.
And some other places I've been that were pretty good. The UK is nice, but surprisingly enough, even though a lot of the people in the United States came from the UK, it's really not much like America. The culture in the UK is quite different than it is here. Australia is much closer than America is.
Interesting.
Than the UK is. I mean, Canada is very nice. I love the people in Canada. Canadians are great people, but it's way too cold in Canada. I would not want to live up there.
I'm from Buffalo, New York. I was 15 minutes from Niagara Falls for most of my life, and it is very cold. But I do love Canada. I love crossing over and spending some time over there. They're very lovely people, and they gave us Tim Hortons, and I just
right, yeah,
they forever have a pass for whatever they do because they gave us Tim Hortons. I'm happy with that.
Yep.
Now, you have mentioned that you enjoy sci-fi for the mirror that it holds up to our own society. What is, and I know that there are many, what is one thing that you can really point to that sci-fi has shown you, the mirror of sci-fi has taught you about today's problems?
The problems are mostly generated by people.
I
think that's it. It's not technology that creates the problems. Technology puts the groundwork in place, and then it is people and their use of that technology that does strange things. And that lesson, I learned it very early. Oh, man. Well, a classical science fiction story is Nightfall by Isaac Asimov. You're probably familiar with the story. Most of your listeners are probably familiar with the story. If you're not, in this story, these people live on a planet that has several suns around it. And because of the coordination of the suns, they never have nighttime. Until one scientist looks at the ephemeris of all of the suns and this one moon that's about to create an eclipse of the last remaining sun, and they're actually going to have nightfall. And he tries to warn all the people about it, and nobody heeds his warning. And in the end of the story, it was a short story. And in the end of the story, it was like Frankenstein's monster. And the people were storming his observatory to destroy the scientists because night had fallen.
Wow.
And it had nothing to do with the science. The science was there.
The science was correct.
The science was correct. All of the orbits of the suns and the planet were all correct, had nothing to do with it, and the entire story revolved around the people and their reaction to it. Mm. And over and over, I've seen that happen.
I'm reminded very much of Christopher Columbus. He very famously used an eclipse that he knew was going to happen to convince natives that he had godlike powers and that they needed to give him offerings, and that's how he fed his people. Was he conned everybody because he knew an eclipse was coming. The science was correct, and man used it for evil.
And we look at science fiction stories ever since then. Philip K. Dick, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? A story of man abuse. Yeah, became Blade Runner, the movie, right? Mm-hmm. And a story of man's abuse of the androids that he had created. Mm-hmm. And how the androids, even though they were practically fully human, were treated as less than human. Mm-hmm. It just, time after time, stories like this fill my soul with an understanding of humanity that is pretty deep. And we see this in other genres of fiction too, but I think in science fiction, it really stands out. And that's probably even more so in hard science fiction than it is in fantasy. Because fantasy, I think, explores an awful lot more of the magic and the strange occurrences that can happen, where science fiction, hard science fiction, tends to rely on the science and then puts the people in that situation. And the story then really has to be about the people, or there's no story.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. Well, with all of that in mind, then, why don't you go ahead and tell us all about your novel, Not Like Us?
So in this novel, imagine the situation. You've used my line already in some of your advertising. You have to read these books fast because the world they're on is about to destroy itself.
I wanted you to see me use it because I heard you say it so many times at the book fair. I'm like, I've memorized this. I can write it.
So imagine yourself as an engineer, and you're watching around you, and the world around you is about to blow itself up in global warfare, and you suddenly realize that your team that you're leading is central to that. That the object that you are creating with your particle physics is an antimatter bomb that's about to be used in that global war to destroy the world. What do you do? How do you deal with yourself in a situation like that? We're back again to morals. And what's your decision going to be? And to make it even worse, that particular protagonist, his name is Jake. Jake is working directly for one of the leaders of the country who's in charge of the Defense Department of his country. And he's been fostered and mentored by this director of the country. And it's a very totalitarian country. He is given no choice in what he does. So
he's got to follow orders. He's got to do what he's got to do.
That's right. Imagine, if you will, the Soviet Union. If you've ever read Solzhenitsyn, you get a very good picture of what the Soviet Union was really like. It was a very repressive society, and people towed the line, or they were literally yanked out of their homes by the secret police and taken off to gulags to live the rest of their lives in abject poverty and most likely die.
Yeah.
And so what happened was the citizens in the Soviet Union aligned themselves with the party line. They had to. And that's what this country is like that he lives in. So what happens is a gorgeous woman comes along.
As they do.
And entices him and seduces him into joining a resistance. And from there, the story goes on. And it is a thriller of an adventure in which he and this woman end up escaping from his position just in time and escaping through the countryside. And I'm not going to spoil the story, but at one point, the antimatter bomb does in fact go off. It doesn't destroy the world because it wasn't that big an antimatter bomb yet.
Luckily.
And they end up running in a chase that is international in scope before they can finally find a place to build a technology that will help people understand each other. And it is that technology that is the hinge point for the story.
And it is that technology, presumably, that is intended to prevent war, much like you yourself were faced with a similar choice earlier on in your life. So, write what you know. This story is, at least in part, influenced by your own experiences.
What a surprise!
I'm shocked.
Don't we all do that as writers? They tell us when we start writing to write what you know.
Indeed.
And, yep, that's part of what I know. So that's what I've written about. Yes. And it, I had such fun. I actually was writing short stories, and I was submitting them to the magazines, and didn't have any published yet, but I was gathering these short stories. And in my local writing group, the leader of my local writing group, I had one short story that just kept getting longer. Short stories in magazines are typically 4,000 to 5,000 words.
A short story that kept getting longer.
You told me about that at the show. Right. The Shadow of the Spark started out as a short story too.
Yeah, a short story. Yeah, sure. Okay.
And my short story grew to over 10,000 words. And I was trying to figure out how to carve it down. And the leader of my writing group looked at it and he says, Eric, he says, this should be a novel.
Yeah, beat it up.
Don't expand it. Make it work.
Make it bigger.
So that's how it happened.
Beautiful.
Now, the short stories have not gone for naught either, because we're talking about my novel, but I do have the other book also, which is this one.
And we are going to get to that one next. But before we do, we move on from Not Like Us, I do want, this book is for readers who love, what would you say?
Excitement, adventure.
Any other books that you might compare, other authors or books that you might compare it to, something that folks may have read?
Gee, that's a question I should have a direct answer to.
That's okay. Well, now you know for the future. Sometimes people ask me that, and I never know what to say. And I'm like, well,
I'm not really sure what to say either. It shares some aspects with the Pern series.
Okay.
Anne McCaffrey and the Pern series, because I've taken some technologies, and around those technologies, I've woven a story that deals with the problems that people face in their world that's about to be destroyed. And along the way, there's a lot of exciting adventure. Jake and Zofia, his girlfriend, get shot at by the Coast Guard. Shells raining down on their heads and splashing in the water all around them. So a lot of excitement in there too.
Right on.
And that's Anne McCaffrey was very good at that stuff.
Excellent. Well, now, as you were about to show us, tell us about the short stories. I know. Wow, I can't talk. I noted a lot of them on your website. Where to begin? It looks like that book is a nice collection.
Where to begin is the other book, and both of these books are available on Amazon Kindle. You can get them either in soft copy or hard copy, or you actually can get hard copy of these too.
Nice.
Or you can get the Kindle ebook version of it. Tales of Verdant. This is the short stories I was writing before, and well, it's some of the short stories I've written. I think I'm working on my 27th short story right now, and
nice.
And this has 14 of them. And these short stories actually define the world of Verdant, on which Not Like Us takes place.
Okay. So it does. All those short stories do, in one way or another, tie into this novel, to the world, to filling out the world a little bit more.
Very much so. Very much so. Yes, indeed. And this world is a small world. It rotates very fast, and it has 4 countries on it, because it's a small world with only 2 continents.
Okay.
And I structured it that way because I wanted to get away from things like the Trantor, the city world, or Hoth, the ice world, where
Yeah.
worlds are characterized by one thing.
I hate that too.
But I hate that.
I
It's
hate
not
that.
realistic.
Yeah, you can't think of a single, like, I mean, honestly, like, look at our own planet. Is the entire thing one thing? Like, no, there's the climates and
Right.
different, ecosystems, and like different creatures live in different areas, and different peoples live in different areas, and all these things. And like, that's a world, that's a full world. It always bothered me about Star Wars that every time they landed on a planet, the entire planet was whatever that was. It's a desert planet, it's an ice planet, it's a water planet.
Right.
uh,
And it's not just Star Wars. It's played out in all
oh,
sorts of
sure.
things. The Dorsey novels have to do with a world of mercenaries. It's all they do for the universe. They provide mercenaries for the universe, and they're wonderful
An
stories.
entire world, all they do is make mercenaries.
That's right. I mean, it's a wonderful story, and these people are really professional soldiers.
What do they
But
eat? How do they feed all these mercenaries if there are no farmers?
there ought to be some farmers there
There
someplace.
ought to be some farmers, a couple of grocers, maybe
So I wanted to be able to play with
butcher or
the
two.
ideas of cultural differences. And because it is in cultural differences that I see so many of the conflicts happen in our world. And so this world has four countries. One of them is the totalitarian country in which Jake and Sophia live.
Mm-hmm.
Very structured life, and you have to be very careful about how you live there. And the second one is a democracy, but it is a full democracy, and that makes it very chaotic.
Mm.
It is not like we
Interesting.
experience the United States or other Western countries. It is a country where political groups are at each other's throats all the time
Interesting.
and battle in the streets. And they vote on things as an entire country multiple times a day through their implants and the infonet. Votes will come out and the entire populace votes on things. And so laws get passed in strange ways. And that's the second country. The third country is a theocracy. And at first glance, it appears like everything is smooth and clean because they all rely on God, whom they call Elah. And yet, underneath that, there's the seamy side of any theocracy, which is that there's an awful lot of control going on.
Mm.
And then the fourth country is way up in the north in the islands, and it's the people who wanted to get away from all of those other three countries. And they live a tribal existence and have just tribes on the different islands. And so these four different cultures can very easily be at odds with each other. And that's what the short stories exhibit. They show those conflicts of culture and people living within those cultures in the last days of their world, just trying to live their lives.
Beautiful. It's really interesting, man. Like, I gotta read this thing. Biggest lesson that you learned from publishing Not Like Us.
Of course, like yours, it's indie published.
Mm.
A lot of authors will go out and hire editors and cover art and things like that, and I did not. I'm one of these strange polymath. I can do everything. It's gifts that God gave me, and so I go off and I do things, and so I really have done it all myself.
It's wonderful.
And some people would be frightened by that. They'd say, "Well, how good is your editing, really?" And I go back and I read.
I get that. I get that concern. Sometimes, you
Yeah.
you need another set of eyes on it, something fresh take or something like that. But
And,
you know
and
what?
I,
Not everybody needs that. Not everybody needs.
well, I do get the help from my local group and from an online group called Other Worlds Writing Workshop.
Beautiful.
And my local group, every chapter of the novel was vetted through them, and they're marvelous. Every one of them are published writers,
Beautiful.
and so they know what they're doing, and they give me great comments on it. And so I've had that help from it, and they pick up on some of the little editing errors that I might have left in. But for the most part, I learned grammar when I was a kid. And I still use it, and I still use it pretty well. So,
Cool.
so the biggest lesson learned is that you can do it yourself. That you no longer need the publishing houses. except for one thing, and that's marketing.
The one thing that they don't really do all that much of. Hey, okay, so I love that you said that though. I really do, because you don't know how many times I run into folks online who, they'll see me talking about having published my novel, and they immediately tell me a heartbreaking story of 20 novels that they've written over the last 20 years or whatever it is, and they've been shopping all of them around to every publisher that exists, and nobody will buy their book and nobody will publish it for them, and they're woe is me, and I'm like, why are you still waiting on these traditional publishers? Why? You wrote 20 novels. I guarantee you at least one of them is good. Publish it yourself. Just do it. Like, there's no excuse anymore. There is no excuse anymore. Everything is available to you online. Every service is available to you online. If you can't make a cover yourself, you can find someone who can. If you can't afford it, you can make it yourself. Like, there are options. Like, you can do things. I always feel bad because I'll tell them that, and they always have an answer. They always have a rebuttal, and ultimately I just feel like, well, they don't want to do it. It's fine. But it really does break my heart, because you know that in those 20 novels somewhere there's just this one like gem where you're like, publish the thing. Oh, it would be so good.
Yeah, that's right. Now, that's not everybody has the skill to do all of those things.
Sure. But again, after 20
I
years,
have spoken with a lot of authors in the last few years where they really still need somebody to look over their work. They need somebody to do the final editing on it. One of my good friends here has his book is in the local Barnes and Noble, and it is the most sold local author book in this store.
Wow.
And yet he paid for an editor for his second novel too, because the editor is bringing in ideas that he didn't have. And I've been watching his progress. He's very close to publishing now, finally. He's still self-publishing, but the editorial process has really helped it and made it even better.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Right on. Okay. What will you do differently when publishing a future work?
The biggest difference is actually happening right now. I am currently in the middle of chapter 19 of what will be 35 for the sequel.
Nice.
And how do I know it's 35? Because I'm an outliner. I have an outline for where the story's going. It may end up being 36 or 37 because my outline changes as my characters have their own ideas. But you probably know about that too.
Oh, yeah.
But what I'm doing different is using the skills that I keep learning. Some of the skills are absolutely, it's amazing how much I keep learning at this. I'm pretty proud of the first book, and I think that it publishes. I think it reads well. As a matter of fact, if you look at that little image in the corner there, you see that badge on the book. I'm very proud of that badge. Because
Tell us about it.
That badge was the Gold Award for the best science fiction novel in the state of Florida.
Beautiful.
The Florida Writers Association just this last October. And so independent authority says, yeah, this is a good book. I'm proud of it. However, I'm still learning, and I keep finding things. I was just opening it up before we started here, and I started reading it, and I found the word "was" twice in the second paragraph.
Oh my God.
Man. If I were writing that now, that wouldn't be there that way. I'd have a much more active verb in that.
I swear to you, Doc, I swear this is a true story. I hit publish on the thing. I open up the file. I find a typo. It like immediately jumps out at me. I swear to God it happened. And I said, oh, like
Yep. You can always change the file though on Kindle.
Yeah. I'm going
to go back in and fix that. But how many times do you want to do that? Each time you open up, you find another.
Right.
So what would I do different? Well, what I'm doing different is using these new skills. For instance, I'm going to give you a plug for somebody else.
Go for it.
The man's name is Wolf Moon. Wolf, W-L-F, Wolf Moon. And Wolf has published a book called, the title of it is, this is a play on his name, How to Write a Howling Good Story.
Gotta love a man with puns.
I love it. Right. I just ran across Wolf Moon and his crowd. He has the wolf pack that kind of gathers around him, and I have become one of those. And I have learned things from him just in the last month. That's it. Howling good things from him. And so I'm building those into the next stories. I'm building them into the next novel already. And as I publish the next novel, I will use these new skills that I've learned and make it even better than the first one. As far as the actual publishing process, right now, I doubt that I'll do anything different. I probably will still.
Broke, don't fix it.
If it's not broke, don't fix it. Right. I mean, there's a first place novel right down there in the corner of your picture. Right. Yeah. So why fix that?
Mic drop. Book festivals and live events like the one that we made our acquaintance at. What is the best and worst thing about these things?
Oh, the best is all the people we get to meet. Mm-hmm. I love doing that. I love sitting at a table and just trying to catch people as they walk by with some line that will grab their attention. You got to read this book fast because these squirrels are going to blow themselves up. That was the line I was using up there in Gainesville when you were sitting beside me. Yeah, sometimes I've used the line about this of what if your world is about to blow itself up and you were responsible? And, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get people to stop and talk. Mm-hmm. And then when they do, then we can talk. Yeah. And I am not in a sell mode usually. I'm just chatting with people and having a good time and meeting people along the way. And I love doing that. And so that leads to the worst is when you're sitting there and nobody comes by.
Yeah, that is the worst.
And you're just sitting there and you got nothing to do but talk with this bozo beside you with the great big beard and hair. and make friends.
Yeah.
So that's the good part of the bad.
Yeah, for sure. I remember sitting there with you and presentation has a lot to do with it as well. And, across the way from us, you had all the like paranormal and mystery writers and they weren't getting nearly as much traffic as we were. I was watching them all day and with every passing person that didn't stop, like they just kept getting more and more just downtrodden about it. You know what I mean? Like you could just see it on their face. They were just feeling progressively worse and worse throughout the day. And I was just, that it sucks because that's the whole thing, right? Is to meet new people here, talk to them and form these connections. Because a lot of times folks, don't buy your book because you were pleasant to talk to. You know what I mean? Like it might not even have anything to do with you pitching the story correctly or whatever, or the trailer that I had on my table. Like sometimes it's just like, I was friendly and they enjoyed talking to me and now they want to support, this author, this artist. Sometimes that's all it is, man. You got to reach out. You got to try to make that connection with people. And that's what I think the best part. I agree with you is that's the best part of it is talking to all these folks and making all these connections, even if it's just the gentleman next to me,
right.
Good dog honor. What's the biggest challenge in marketing and how do you face it? How much marketing do you even do for this?
Not enough, obviously, because I'm not selling as many books as I think I could.
Likewise.
It is the biggest challenge is simply reaching the people you don't know. Mm. I mean, the first 20 sales are easy because they go to friends, right?
Yeah, that's right. It's always the first 20. You're right.
but then how do you get past that? How do you get to the people you don't know, who don't know you, all of those strangers out there in the world? And I have been trying lots of different methods. And all of them seem to work a little bit. And sometimes they work really well and sometimes they don't. I offered my book, the collection of short stories, I offered it for free on Kindle for 3 days. And I advertised that through another website, paid advertising, that this other web group sends out an email once a week to their list, and they've got hundreds of thousands of people on their list. And this email has, here are the books that are free this week in whatever genre you've selected. And so I sent them I sent them $50 to go do that for me, and I had it out there for 3 days and distributed over 750 books
Wow.
for free.
Yeah, but that's
Yeah, but that's still 750 people who have
you
a
now have your
book
novel.
of my short stories, and I'm thinking this is really good. I saw no bump in sales afterwards. I saw no bump in reviews afterwards.
That's the big one too, is the reviews, man. Like that's what I'm after these days.
So was that worth doing or not? I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
Uh,
See,
I tried.
here's the thing. Like all those, I did the same thing with Smashwords. I did a sale where I released my novel for free, and during that month when it was free, I sold 99 copies, more than I had ever sold in a single month before. 99. Uh, and like you, I didn't see a bump in sales after. I didn't see a bump in reviews after. And in my mind, it's because, well, these folks, they went into a giant, directory of free and discount books, and they just started grabbing stuff because it's free, and now it's just sitting on their digital shelf, and they don't even know that it's there. They're not reading it. It's
Right.
like, was it worth it? I don't know.
Now I did actually. I can't say there were no sales, because in those 3 days I did see some pages read under Kindle Unlimited. And that's, if you're familiar with Kindle,
Yeah, that's something.
yeah, that's something. People pay an annual fee or a monthly fee for Kindle Unlimited, and it allows them to read books for free. And then the authors get paid their royalties based upon how many pages they read, proportionalized, and Amazon does all of the calculations on that. So
And we're trusting them that they got it right.
right, yeah. And I know what happened was that people went to the link for the free book, and when you open up the page in Amazon Kindle for the free book, there are 2 buttons there. One button gets you the free book for $0, and the other one gets you Kindle Unlimited for $0. And if somebody's already a Kindle Unlimited member, they punch that button and then they start reading it. And so then I actually get paid. Whereas
Nice.
if they punched the free book version, I wouldn't have gotten paid.
Right.
But still, that was something.
Yeah. Yeah. That is a nice little added perk of the Kindle Unlimited thing, is that even if the book is free, you're at least getting paid if they read it.
So the biggest challenge in marketing is just reaching people. And I keep trying lots of different ways. Like you, I have a newsletter. Like you, I also have I think you have a blog also.
Yes. I do.
And this last fall, before Christmas, I was writing a series of blog articles about the edges of science. Where is it that science does not work so well? And I was sort of responding to the mantra that's been out there in the media recently about believe the science. If you're a scientist, that mantra makes no sense at all.
Because you're supposed to challenge it, right? You're supposed to challenge
it. The whole purpose of science is to challenge it, right? Exactly. You understand that. And so I started writing about areas where science really doesn't know what they're talking about. And they acknowledge they don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah. Well, there's this now famous clip from that show, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. The premise of that show, if you've never seen it, is that there's these 4 or 5 friends, and they're just the worst people that have ever existed, and mischief happens, right? Well, there's this episode where one of them has just decided that he no longer believes in God or a higher power, and one of the friends in the group is very much opposed to that idea. He's like, of course, like, we know, blah, blah, blah. So they're arguing back and forth about the science versus the religion. And, there's the argument of, oh, you're trusting a book that was written by people that you've never met, and blah, blah, blah. And then the guy turns it around. He's like, well, how do you know all this science stuff? Well, I read it in a book. Okay. So you read it in a book from a guy who wrote it that you've never met. And did you do the figures? Did you go in and do the math and check it and see if it's all right? No, you just trusted the guy, like it's interesting how we're both just doing the same thing and arguing with each other about who's doing better. But humans.
My third career, Adrian, I ran a small business for my third career doing training courses in large systems engineering. And it was a successful small business. I ended up selling it for profit at the end. Nice. And And I loved teaching. I apparently was given a gift for standing in front of a class and teaching. And one of the things that I would do is I would illustrate my courses with all sorts of stuff from everywhere. And at one point, I got on exactly that topic about the difference between religion and science. And I pointed out to the class, I said, the only real difference is which one you want to believe in, because both of them are belief structures. Both science and religion are based upon assumptions that we choose to believe. In science, the basic underlying assumption in science is causality. If this happens, then that happens. That's the basic underlying thing science is based upon, is proven by experimentation. We run an experiment so that we can repeat that causality. Do this, and that happens. And what happens if causality isn't real? What happens if that's only an ephemeral observation on our part?
Wow. Yeah, like it would challenge everything.
Right. So there's a science fiction element right there. And I wrote that blog about the edges of science, constantly reminding people, this has to do with science fiction, because when we take the edges of science, there are always really good stories in there.
Awesome.
Right.
Doc,
yes.
We're going to start winding down here. So these last few questions are just kind of loosey-goosey ones. Do you have any book recommendations for folks out there? Anything you've read recently that you really enjoyed, or something that you've always read over and over? What would you recommend?
Wow. There is a lot of books I've loved. To be able to single out any one and say this is the best one I've ever read really doesn't
maybe
work.
The most recent one or something like that.
Last year, it took me almost a year to do it. I read all the way through the Hugo novels.
Okay. I haven't read those, but I hear they're very good.
Downloaded the list of all the Hugo Award-winning novels, and I read through them. And actually, no, I didn't read all the way through them.
The list of Hugo.
I got into the awards in the 1980s. There were several books there that I just didn't want to read.
Oh, sure, yeah. There's some that you just, hard pass. I get that.
Some of them recently that really hit me good were John Scalzi's Red Shirts.
Red Shirts. Is that a Star Trek reference by any chance?
It's a Star Trek reference.
Okay.
Without giving away the novel, I will tell you that the main characters in his novel are the red shirts for real world. And they keep noticing that there's a certain core of people on their spaceship that keep getting in trouble and keep getting out of it again. And yet all of the lower level people keep getting killed by the trouble.
Yeah. Suspicious
situation, right? Wonderful premise. Really good story.
Love it. All right.
Now another one. Let me give you another one. A trilogy is okay. My mind just went blank. Never mind.
I've been there, my friend. What's a new your favorite writing hack or writing tool, or anything in particular that has really helped your writing lately? Anything like that?
Yeah, I'm going to pull this one from Wolf Moon. Boom. Heart's Desire.
Okay, what's that?
Look at any good story, and the protagonist starts out with some heart's desire. And my job as an author is to present that to the reader so that the reader really buys into it and likes that protagonist's heart's desire and wants them to have it. And then my job is to rip it away from the protagonist. Spend the entire rest of the story trying to get it back. Wonderful idea.
Final question for you, Doc Honor. Do you have any questions for me?
When's your second book coming out?
Very good question. If I stick to my deadlines, I should have the second novel out by next year. April 30th of this year is 1 year since this one came out. It would be very, very nice to keep them both coming out around the same time and keep it down to 2 years between each novel. We'll see. We'll see if I pull that off, but that's the goal.
Now, as I remember it, your Shadow with a Spark was pretty long, wasn't it?
It's 147,000 words, and that's having taken out the prologue, which is that short story that I give away for free, that's another 10,000 words. So I would,
Right.
if I were to put that in there, it would be almost 160,000 words. It's a big book.
Yep. That's a pretty big book. My Not Like Us is about 115,000, and it's a little long too. So,
Yeah, that's nothing to sneeze at. That's a good size because these days, these kids, they like their books little, 50,000 words, and move on.
So another question for you is, how's it going for you? Are you making good progress on it? Are your characters leading the way?
I am making good progress on it. I finally stopped fighting my characters and gave in to them recently because I had this outline that, if I'm honest with myself, I knew that there was something missing. I knew that there was like an X factor that wasn't quite there yet. Whatever spark is going to live inside this novel, it wasn't quite there yet. I hadn't found it yet, but I had the story beats. And I was trying to write those chapters, doing it my way, the way that I did this one with the outline. And my characters were just like, sorry, dude, this isn't working. Like, it's just not working. Mm-hmm. And so finally I was like, okay, let's, since I know more or less what I want to do, and I know more or less where these characters are, let's just kind of freeball this thing and pants it a little bit. And I just started literally pantsing a zero draft of it. And it's flowing out of me like water. It's finally like working, and the characters are like, thank you for finally letting me do what I want to do. And I'm like, you little brats. So yeah, it's working. It's working. Finally, it's working.
And isn't that amazing when that happens? When
it's so weird.
The story just takes you over, and you're working hard at something, and then all of a sudden time just goes. 4 hours go by, and you've thrown another 3,000 words into the book. And it just happened like that.
I
love it when that happens. I have just been through a similar kind of time. I kind of got stuck about a month ago on my second novel. And part of the problem was that Jake and Sophia from the first novel, from Not Like Us, appear in the second novel, but they're not central to it.
Okay.
And so I had them in there just, continuing their story a little bit, but the centrality was on Red Finnet Power Faith. and my writing group said, no, we know Jake and Sophia. We want to know them. These two characters aren't Jake and Sophia, they're flat. And so I started adding more of their story into it. And it started intertwining with the main plot. And all of a sudden, about a month ago, I got stuck on how those two plots were going to intertwine with each other. And I just 2 days ago broke through that roadblock and took my outline and changed about the next 10 chapters and where they're going, and realigned them so that they work better together.
Nice.
And now those characters who were so alive in Not Like Us can still live in this book too.
That's awesome. It's always a difficult challenge to focus on new characters in the sequel, and especially with folks who have read the first one, they're going to want to know what's going on with those. I had not the same issue, but something similar in this book, where there's essentially two worlds. There's the planet side stuff, and there's the stuff up in the space station stuff. And that's, the first book, it's all there, but the second book, we're going to go to the planet and spend some, and so we have two very big storylines going on simultaneously, and I wondered if I needed to split it up into two books and maybe just have one for one side and one for the other, and ultimately I decided against that, because if I did that, then the people looking for these characters are not going to like the other book because they're not in it. And so I brought it back together. It's all working good now.
Good. Yeah.
All right. Well, Doc, thank you very much. That is all the questions that I had for you today. I'm going to wind things down here for everybody. But before I do you have anything to promote? Any events coming up? Or the links to your book are in the description below. If you want to remind people about your book, this is your moment to sort of take the stage and tell the people at home whatever you want to tell them.
Buy the books. Make the reviews, because reviews are really important to independent authors. When you go and you look at a book on Amazon and you see only 5 reviews on that book, you say to yourself, well, nobody really liked this very much. So help us with that. When you read the book and you like what you see, give us a review. Make it an honest review. You don't have to pump it up, but give us a review, and that will help it. And yes, you can find both of my books on Amazon, Not Like Us and Tales of Verdant. Thank you. Nice to
Very,
be
very,
here.
very, very nice. And just to piggyback on what you said, folks, it does. You don't have to write your own novel. If you're worried about writing the review, this was a good book is a perfectly fine review. It doesn't need to be anything more than that. Just write the review. We appreciate it. It would be very, very nice. Okay, give me 1 second because my kid just walked in again.
Well, while he's doing that, I'll say you can even just click on the stars, and you don't even
Yeah,
have to write anything at all. That helps too.
that alone is a big, big help. Absolutely. All right. So to the folks watching at home, next week there's no live show. This was the series finale for the Writers Den. We are going to kind of retool the channel from here on. So I'm taking 2 weeks off to create original videos, to plan some new live events, and to launch something very special on my own website, which I'm still creating. But ultimately, it's going to be a members only area where you can get short stories written by me. You can get some behind the scenes stuff on the creation of the first book. You can see some behind the scenes stuff on the creation of the second book as I'm working on it right now. There's going to be Q&As, all kinds of fun stuff in there. And I look forward to launching that. It's going to be in a few weeks. So stay tuned, subscribe, do all the things. It's going to be great. Tomorrow, Doc Honor will be in the green room. He and I are going to go off and record this now, but for you guys, it's tomorrow. So tomorrow, watch the end of the green room, the final episode of that as well, where we're just going to do a little after show and talk to Doc Honor here. And thank you very, very much, Doc. It was an honor to have you here. Pun very much intended. Like, comment, and subscribe, everybody. Write on, writers, and we are out.